Welcome to the Center in the City podcast. I'm your host, Wade Brill, and during this series, I'll be interviewing various thought leaders, wellness experts, and humans on how they practice sustainable self-care and mindfulness. We'll get real and raw, talk about the light and the shadow side of self-care and mindfulness, and how we can actually stay centered amid the chaos and the hustle and bustle of our modern day world. So settle in and get centered. This podcast episode is brought to you by Centered in the City, a virtual on-demand self-care and mindfulness platform with different meditations, journaling prompts, nourishing recipes, and Pilates flows, all designed to support you feeling calm, focused, and energized as you live your life in this modern day world. For more information, head on over to centeredinthecity.com. Welcome back to the Centered in the City podcast. I am so glad you are here. Today in the pod, we're talking with Christopher Lee Maher. Christopher is a retired U.S. Navy SEAL, best-selling author, and holistic wellness pioneer. You can read Christopher's full bio in the show notes. It's pretty amazing, so make sure to check it out. Christopher shares with us some of his story and inspiration for studying stress and how it affects our internal and external bodies. I really love Christopher's approach to exploring stress because he takes a holistic lens to think about our mental, our emotional, our physical, and our spiritual bodies. So much wisdom is shared in this episode. I know you're going to learn so much. So let's settle in and let's get centered. Christopher, welcome to the Center in the City podcast.
Hello.
I want to welcome you with one of my favorite questions. What does being centered mean to you?
Okay. Has anyone ever asked me that before? No. Being centered to me is simple. It's four parts. One, my mind is quiet. Two, my emotions are grounded. Three, my body is very comfortable and fluid. And four, my energy is abundant. And so I'm shooting for those four things. If any of those four things is off, then I know I'm stressed about something.
Ooh, okay. This is juicy because all of those descriptors sound lovely. Like right when you said them, I'm like, oh yeah, I want that. And oh yeah, I love when my body's like this. And when like my emotions are grounded. I'm curious, how often do you find yourself in a state where all of those feel in alignment?
98% of the time.
Okay, talk to us. What's your practice? What's your secret or
My secret
methodologies
sauce.
yeah, exactly. What's your secret sauce that
Yeah.
supports you connecting to those elements?
Yeah, what happens for me is I have made this path my lifestyle, right? So the way that I stay in that state, those states consistently, is that I go and I stay receptive. And what I mean by that is I let other people come in and work on me. So I work with a guy named Dr. Mickey Osanki. He's the world's foremost authority on esoteric acupuncture. So he's always laying down these very powerful like light grids in my body. So that's one thing. Another thing, I always go and see this guy at least twice a week named Terry Seward, if I'm lucky, 3 times a week, which is awesome. And he does a practice called alpha biotics, which pulls your nervous system out of an inappropriate stress state. And then I go and see another woman here in LA named Sola, and she has a practice called Karsine Song. So and she does Chine Sang as well. So she's always clearing out my abdomen and releasing excessive heat and cold from my organs, and always realigning my sexual energy to my crown. And lastly, I have my own practice, right? And so in my practice, I developed a system that I call Bestersize, which uses isometric, eccentric, and concentric contractions to strengthen, recruit, but also stretch, which means reduce daily accumulated stress plus a little bit of my lifetime accumulated stress load every single day every single month, every single week, every single month. So since I got into this game into what 1999, I've been focused in this direction and making it my lifestyle for almost 25 years. Right. So I live and breathe this way. The other thing is probably most important is I don't do any refined sugars. There's never any alcohol in my body. There's never any recreational or pharmaceutical drugs in my body. There's no food colorings or preservatives. There's no nicotine. So I'm never overstimulated and I'm never managing my life with negative stress management tools, right? So everything that I tune into is a positive stress management tool. Plus, I have access to the systems that I've developed for stress resolution.
Okay, so you have really made this your intentional lifestyle, from what you put in your body to the amount of time you spend with practitioners, amount of time you spend with your own practices to help manage the stress load. I'm curious, what inspired you before we get to like what people who are not in their day to day able to devote, 10 hours a week to stress management in this format. I'm curious, like, what inspired you to get into the realm of stress management in your own journey?
Well, when my body was filled with pain and I started losing, well, the function of my sense organs reduced, which means my hearing and my sight, my smell, I reached out for help. And when you're in pain, inconsistent pain is okay because it comes and it goes, but unrelenting chronic pain, eventually one day, no matter how strong your will is, you grow tired of it. And I had a really strong will. No one on the call knows I'm a former US Navy SEAL, so you can imagine my will is strong. I went to medical school, you gotta have a strong will for that. I trained for the Olympic trials, you gotta have a strong will for that. So everything that I did in my life required a really strong will. The problem for me was my will was overengaged. And so I interpreted reality through a very fixed perspective. I thought that everything in life that you have is worth working hard for. And so if it wasn't done through consistent, vigilant effort, I assumed that it had no value because all of my esteem was built from focused, intent, hard work, right?
Okay, I'm going to pause you there because that is like gold right there, just to emphasize, because I think a lot of my listeners struggle with that. There's this belief, especially in our Western dominated culture and capitalistic culture of, push harder, faster. You got to win, you got to be the best. If you're not working hard, if you're not losing sleep, right? Are you even working? Is kind of a dogma that is this like overarching pressure for people. Like, the people have a hard time resting. They have a hard time slowing down. They feel guilty for those things. I'm curious, like, how did you work with restructuring that thought pattern for yourself?
I think it's difficult to ignore pain. And when you run into a wall and you have emotional pain, and you run into the wall, some people they end up with physical pain. Other people end up with spiritual pain, which translates to exhaustion. And other people end up with mental pain, which is mental illness, right? When you, how do I say this? Um, when you're hit from all sides with these varying levels of discomfort, at one point, it's difficult to ignore. And so once I got my first experience of having no discomfort in my body any longer and my hearing improving and my vision improving immediately, I remember walking from my car to the grocery store. And during that walk from my car to the grocery store, for the very first time in my life, I said to myself, this is what legs are supposed to feel like. Like they're supposed to feel this light. My posture's supposed to be this erect. My spirit's supposed to be like this gentle and this light. And then once I observed that experience of myself in contrast to where I was before, I was no longer valuing the other. And so at that moment, I was like, oh, yeah, I want more of this. Whatever this is, I have no idea what it is because I've never had it before, but I know it feels better than what I was feeling before. Because, when you have unrelenting anxiety, it becomes a base state that you're used to. So you don't know what it's like to be without it. And so then you're going to do everything you can in your life to keep creating it. Well, once I was out and I had a clear shot at freedom, I invested every dollar I had, every extra minute, everyone I could recruit to get vested in helping me get the four things I talked about at the beginning of our call: quiet mind, grounded emotions, abundant energy, and a comfortable, fluid, strong body. Once I had that at a consistent basis, the other was no longer interesting. So going out late at night, on the weekends, partying with my friends, that had no interest because I was no longer interested in waking up ever and feeling worse than great. Okay?
I think what you're pointing to is so important because sometimes we can skip those moments where we notice, like, oh, this feels different and this feels like right, like from a something small, like we get out of a massage and we just notice our wow, the tension has kind of melted off of the body and my body feels more relaxed, right? To allow ourselves to savor that, or to even just savor a really yummy, nutritious meal that we just had and how good that feels in our body. And how if we skip those moments, those micro moments where we notice we feel really good, when we skip over those, we then aren't like able to touch into what's possible. So, like, how important it is to really savor and slow down to these moments that you're recognizing so that we can realize like they're possible to achieve out there.
Yeah, I mean, the experience is, once you have the experience of freedom and calm and peace, when you get into a situation where that is impossible, now the contrast of it makes you value the peace and the quiet even more. And so instead of like going out with my friends on the weekends late at night, I was meeting them for lunch over what you call the nutritious, delicious meal, right? And now I was having greater amounts of intimacy. And I think once you have intimacy as a base state for your functioning, anything that's less than intimate is uninteresting, right? There's no longer a magnetic for experiencing something that's impersonal. And once you have that, then the other stuff it naturally falls away. And so your attractions change. And as I got more grounded in my body, as I got more clear in my mind, as I got more excited in my emotions and more vested in my spiritual growth, the only thing that had interest to me was even more growth. And so then I devoted more time, more energy, more effort, more resources. And so then eventually, this was who I was all day long, all evening long. And so this is who I've become. It's different when you have a message, right? You have like a really great insight and you're like, oh, I want to share it with people. It's different to have a message versus becoming the message. And I remember at one point, I thought, you know what? God gave me this great insight about a messenger versus becoming the message. I'm going to invest even more time, more energy, and more effort so that wherever I go, I am my product. And that level of congruency is what's going to inspire people to take a risk to get them to change something that feels impossible about themselves. And so I've vested everything I have in my life into becoming more peaceful and more grounded.
Yeah. Walking the talk, letting it truly glow from the inside out. I love that invitation. I'm curious for people who aren't aware of stress, right? Because I think it's a modern thing to say, like, oh, I'm so stressed. I have back to back, da, 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 and we kind of also can wear stress like a badge of armor and connect it to our sense of worth. What are some signs and signals that you see with the people you work with, or even within yourself in the beginning of your journey, of how stress was showing up from a physical perspective, a mental perspective, emotional perspective, spiritual perspective?
Yeah, I think that's a big question with many layers to it. I think the signs and symptoms are easiest for people to pay attention to because at least people know when they're in pain, right? So if you have a headache, obviously you're stressed, right? If you wake up in the morning and your vision is more dim, obviously you're stressed, okay? If you're looking for a cup of coffee first thing in the morning, you are highly stressed, like you're beyond stressed, okay? If you're finding difficulty falling asleep at night, obviously you're overstressed, okay? So the places in your life where you consistently have pain, those are the red lights on the ambulance that are flashing, that are informing you, hey Jake, hey Susie, hey Paul, hey Mike, hey Jamal, take a half step back and ask yourself, why do I have this pain? Now, for me, the signs in my life are um, they're pretty simple. If I find myself a little more attracted to sweet than usual, then I know that there's a conversation that I need to have with someone that I've been avoiding, right? Because the spleen and the pancreas are the organs for clear communication. So if I'm avoiding communication, and because the nature of the pancreas is sweet, that's what it deals with, excess sugar in your system, I'm going to be very attracted to sweet when I'm avoiding that conversation, right? Um, if I am ignoring someone who's trying to communicate with me, then I know I've spent more energy than I have to give. So texts is coming in or calls coming in, I'm not getting back to them right away. I'm sort of like, oh no, I can't deal with you right now. Then I know I'm spending my capital instead of my interest. And I need to bake into my schedule this week at least 2 or 3 really deep nights of sleep, right? Instead of going to bed at 1, I need to go to bed at like 11:45. Instead of going to bed at midnight, I need to go to bed at 10. Those are little symptoms that rise up that I'm able to observe because I know I've been with myself for so long. I know my patterns, right? I know how I respond in my behavior to external stress. And so as soon as I become aware of that, then I take action.
I think a lot of people feel invincible until something happens, right? So until there's extreme pain, until there's a health diagnosis, like I had cancer at the age of 21, that was my part of my wake up call to just my lifestyle and how I'm spending my energy and fueling my body and moving my body and talking to my body. I think for most people, they again just feel invincible until they hit a wall of some sort. And so I'm hearing from you that it's getting curious to pay attention to what form of pain is showing up for you. And I guess pain could be on a different scale for
For
each
everyone.
person,
Yeah.
right? So it could be a subtle, maybe headache, but it's constant and consistent. Or it could be a pain in the low back, or maybe it's an emotional, like heartbreak feeling, or so
Or feeling
noticing.
of loneliness.
Yeah. And how often, though, people avoid pain? We want to numb it out, we want to distract it. Any wisdom there of how, like, I was even having a conversation with a friend the other day who is such a hard worker. She is like such a go-getter in her corporate job, and she's been with this company for a few years, and she was kind of getting the itch of like, ugh, things aren't like feeling a rub at work, and kind of not able to sit with the discomfort of it. And so for her, she was like, okay, I need to switch jobs, I need to move. And with some of my background with mindfulness and meditation, the training is like our capacity to be with the spectrum of life, right? To be with the pain and to be with the pleasure. Can we observe it all and not necessarily get reactive to it? And I think what I was seeing in our conversation together, my girlfriend and I, as well as like what I can just witness, it's like we want to avoid pain. So where's the like discernment for you around what's wise to like sit and observe and get curious to just notice it, and where do we actually need to start taking action to deal with it?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm comfortable being uncomfortable, and I'm uncomfortable with the unknown, okay? Because that's how life trained me. Yet I can be comfortable with being uncomfortable until it closes my heart.
And how
Once
do
it
you know when it
closes my,
closes your heart?
because I become avoidant,
Hmm.
right? And I become conditional in my perspective. I'm either disapproving, judging, criticizing, or taking an overly moralizing position over someone in my life, or I'm competing with God, right? So reality has happened and the moment has been lived, and now I'm judging the moment even after it's lived itself out, right? So I'm still like the next day arguing in my head with someone about something that's already happened. It's already occurred. So at that point, when my heart closes, then I know that I've gone too far somewhere and I need to regroup. I need to de stress. I need to detense. I need to detox. And I need to get back to a state of neutrality. So, neutrality, I add nothing, I take nothing away. I simply see things as they are. When I'm invested interest, I know that I'm leaving my heart and I've entered my head. And my philosophy, and this is personal to me, is the most important thing to experience on planet Earth is the abundant amounts of love that are available. Well, anything that takes me out of my heart into my head, I think should be looked at. What's the underlying driver for that? Because I know that my love is now conditional. And that always feels uncomfortable to me.
What are some ways that you tap back into that unconditional love and open your heart, or practice keeping your heart open? Because it can be hard in this full world that we live in.
Yeah, I mean, the first step is I do my best to understand their perspective. And then once I understand their perspective, I accept their choice. And after I accept their choice, I forgive myself for judging them. And then I forgive them for their action. And then I drop right back into unconditional love. Takes me, I don't know, what, 60 seconds?
And that's a practice that you've cultivated over many
Over time.
years.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
initially
Just
it
for
was
people
like,
listening, to not compare.
right? It could be years, and then it was months, and then it was weeks, and then it was days, and then it was hours, and then it was minutes, and then it was a minute, right? But that all came along, listeners, with the devotion that I had opening up my body and removing a lifetime accumulation of stress and distortion and dysfunction that I picked up, one, from my parents, my childhood, right? And then what my parents picked up from their parents and what their parents picked up from their parents. And if you've studied any bit of epigenetics, You understand if the average human is walking around with at least 14 generations of behaviors that have nothing to do with them. It's like when I work with someone, the first thing I get them to understand is like, look, these problems, you actually didn't create these. These problems were they were here on earth before you got here. You just happen to be in a position to be able to transmute your lineage's investment in this destructive behavior, right? In this confusion, in this anxiety, in this fear, in this state of self-righteousness. So let's just take a half step back and go, oh, okay, I get it. I'm on earth. I only have a short amount of time while I'm here. What if I invested a little bit of energy on seeking freedom from the things that my ancestors could never get over that left them with a limited life expression? And if you can put a little bit of time and energy into that, it allows you to be inwardly honest. And once you're inwardly honest, you can be outwardly honest and seek someone like you who can help them get into a grounded, clear mind so that they can take heartfelt action to their own benefit and to the benefit of those they happen to influence.
Yeah, and I feel like for me in my own personal journey, it's like an onion layer. There just keeps being like peels of like, oh, you know, it's not just a 12 sessions with the therapist to explore my ancestral trauma of being my grandparents being Holocaust people escaped the Holocaust. Like
Yeah,
so there's many layers, and it's like as I get older I start to notice different things, and they had that curiosity of like, what's mine, and like what's being embedded here. So I love that invitation for us to get curious, and also there's freedom when we can name that some of it's not quote unquote ours as our ego, that it's in our genetics, and yet we have the power to reshape those genes.
for sure. Yeah, we have the power to transmute and transfigure. And it's a very interesting time in humanity because even if we go back 10 years, right, the word mental wellness was still living in the ethers, right? And then, eventually they're going to get to emotional wellness, right? Which will, that'll come along. Then they'll get to spiritual wellness, right? And then, and for me, it's the focusing on all of these things, focusing on your physical wellness, focusing on your mental wellness, focusing on your emotional wellness, and focusing on your spiritual wellness. And to people, you come up with a buzzword like that, and they're like, well, what does that mean? What that means for me and the work that I do in the world is your spiritual wellness is about your ability to honor your ethics, your morals, your principles, and your values on a daily basis so you can build spiritual esteem, right? And then working on your emotional wellness is about reducing anxiety and increasing excitement, like getting really clear on what are the connections in your life that inspire you to want to have deeper connections. And then when I look at mental wellness, I look at, you know, what parts of your life are you lacking clarity in? Like, where are you unclear about who it is you really are and why you're really here? And once you get clear on who it is you are and why you're really here, it makes it very easy to be mentally well because you're honoring your own innate value system. And then physical wellness for me is, are you removing tension and stress and distortion that's being stored in your physical tissues, your muscles, your bones, your fascia, all of your organs, any aspect of your physical structure, your skin, your hair, your sense organs. What are you doing to clean those up and amplify their function so that you could have more mental, physical, emotional, spiritual clarity about who it is you are and what it is you represent and what you want to impart on the planet around you and how you want to be impacted.
Mm-hmm. Huge believer in holistic wellness, which is what you're talking about, because yeah, it's not just one thing. These full beings that have all of these different dimensions, and if we just work on one, it doesn't mean it, it can domino effect, but it's like we got to take care of the whole. And I'm curious for people who might be listening that feels like really good, but it also feels really overwhelming. What would be one suggestion you might have of like where they can begin on their journey, or what's one thing that they can try, or what's their entry point that you think is a typical, of course, every human is different, but is a good starting place?
I think the first starting place is go into your closet and whatever that skeleton is that you hide from everyone, find someone you trust in your life, whether that be a therapist, a meditation teacher, a sensei, even a parent or sibling or a friend from college or a friend from high school, and sit down and let someone know about the skeleton that you have the most shame and guilt about. Like, if you can let go of that one, then the domino effect is enormous because that's the only thing you're hiding from humanity, right? This insecure feeling about this inner deficiency that you have. And the guilt and the shame, once you shed that, the world, your ego, your fear no longer has control over you because now someone knows. So invite someone into your story around the places where you have your deepest insecurities. Because what you're going to find out is once you share those that, oh, well, oh, what that happened to you too, Jake? When was this? I didn't know about that. And now you're no longer held hostage by this guilt and this shame, which then causes you to be overly contained and overly controlled. Because when you're in an overly contained and over controlled state, there's no one who can help you because you're no longer in the receptive mode. So, the fastest way to get yourself in receptive mode is take your biggest skeleton and tell somebody about it and let it go. That's like that's the first and the most crucial step that any human could ever take.
Mm. I love that invitation when you said go into your closet. I was like, oh, where are we going? Like Marie Kondo here on like energy of clothing? No, but I love it. Right to the shame, the guilt, where what we can out within ourselves and
Yeah,
where we can feel most human. And I love
and
that
humane.
invitation. Yeah, I love that invitation. It's doable,
Doesn't
even if
cost
it feels
anything.
stretchy for people.
Doesn't right? And it doesn't cost anything, right?
Hmm.
There's no therapist to hire. There's just like even if all you have is a pet in your life where you feel safe and secure, put Toto on the couch and share with Toto this secret that you have that you've been hiding and let it out. Let out this insecurity, this shame, this guilt, this inner deficiency. And you feel your whole system relax. And then get a little braver and then find somebody. Look, if you have to hire a professional, it's going to be worth $150. Maybe you don't even like massage. Go to the other side of town where no one knows you, right? Go to get a flight for $69 from Southwest. Fly to a city where no one knows you. Hire a massage therapist that doesn't know anyone in your life and tell them about this guilty, shameful event in your life and let go of it.
Yeah, the letting go is key here because how easily the mind can pick it back up and do what you were talking about earlier about ruminate it, judge it, and chew on it, or like sometimes it can feed the shame monster for people. Even being conscious of what stories we're then feeding after we release, actually let that shit go is
Yeah.
so important.
It's so important. And it's if there's a first step for every human on the planet, that's the first step to heal this planet.
I love
Every
that.
human take the one thing you have the most guilt and the most shame about and share it with someone. It couldn't be easier, but it also is very difficult. And look, I'm willing to acknowledge that and do it anyway. Who cares if it's difficult? Like, if you like the planet that you're looking at in all phases, then you know what? Keep your secret to yourself. But when you look at what's going on in Israel and Hamas and Palestine and Afghanistan and Iran and Russia and Ukraine and the United States and all the conflicts we're involved in supporting from behind, like all that stuff, all the stuff that's happening at the borders, all the sexual stress and trauma that's going on in the world, all the alcoholism and addiction that you see in the world that's going on. If you're okay with all of that, then you know what? Keep your secrets in your closet. But if you go, you know what? If I don't change my orientation to my shame and my guilt, how can I ask the president of Ukraine, the president of Israel, the leader of Hamas, the leader of ISIS, how can I ask any of these organizational leaders to admit their own fears and insecurities if I'm unwilling to do it myself? Take some heartfelt action to your own benefit.
One of the things you shared earlier, and I can even just see it in your body language for the listeners who can't see Christopher, but like you are embodying the receptivity. There's like a leaning back.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep. There's a
yeah.
resting. You're present, but you're here. And I notice in my own body, sometimes I do a lot of leaning forward. And that's kind of goes back to that like pushing, striving energy we talked about. And so I have to constantly remind myself and feel that shift in my body to shift back, to rest
Mm,
back into the moment, to receive the moment. And I think that can even be something else. Another invitation for listeners to practice is just like, can you pay attention to the shape that your body's taking and how you're interacting with life? And where can we find a little bit more ease to just be present to life? And maybe that can even help us open up our hearts a little bit more.
mm. Yeah, 1000%. Simply take a deep breath and find some place inside of you that's begging for release and call someone and invite them into your story. You're worth it. No matter what anyone told you growing up, you're absolutely worth every other human on this planet. You're worth their attention, their love, their consideration, their affection.
Amazing. Thank you, Christopher, for sharing your heart with us and inspiration. Where can people learn more about you and your work?
The easiest way to find out more about me is to go to truebodyintelligence.com. Right there, I have podcasts that I've been on. I write articles all the time. Like, if you really want to understand stress and how it's limiting your ability to thrive in this world, and you want to learn how to get out of survival based strategies, the easiest thing to do is to go to truebodyintelligence.com. When you get there, my face is going to be shown to you on the cover of my book. Order the book, get the download. I give a free consultation to anyone who's willing to read my book. And let me help you in some way.
Amazing. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Oh, I forgot one place. You know, they always tell me to do this because I'm understanding the value of social media now. You can go to Instagram or TikTok and put in my name, Christopher Lee Maher, and it's Maher. And you can follow me, and I give a download like every other day. I give you like a 60-second to 90-second download about some aspect of growth in your life. It's totally free. If you're only using me for inspiration, great. Use me for inspiration.
Amazing. So much wisdom to give. So definitely check it out. And thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. It was lovely to be in your presence.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Center in the City podcast. I am sure you have walked away with so many insights and nuggets. I know I have. Join Christopher and I on Instagram to continue the conversation. Share with us your takeaways, what you're noticing about your relationship to stress, maybe even what feels painful in your life right now from a mental, emotional, physical, or spiritual perspective. I know I did my own reflection, so I can't wait to hear yours. Know somebody that would benefit from listening to this podcast episode? Pause right here and share it with them. We know sharing is caring. If you're wanting some stress management support, ways that you get to come back to your center and find neutral, I welcome you to head on over to centeredinthecity.com/login and check out the holistic resources from Pilates flows, meditations, nourishing mindful eating and cooking recipes, to journaling prompts, all there to support you coming back to your center. Check out the resources. They are free for the next few months. And until next time, stay centered.